The station corridors of Orpheus Alpha gleamed under the artificial lights, every panel polished to a reflective silver that stretched the hallways into endless ribbons. Security drones hummed softly, their sensors scanning for anomalies, while cadets scuttled past, manuals clutched in clawed hands or hovering pads. Yet, amidst this order, there was a ripple of gentle chaos. Two small, predator-like cubs padded beside Lieutenant Mara Chen, human liaison officer, their tails flicking with curiosity and mischief. The cubs, bright orange and cream with retractable claws, for sharp eyes and mischievous grins, were supposed to be confined to her quarters, or at least to the observation areas. Yet here they were, trotting beside her like miniature storm clouds of fur and energy, their tiny claws tapping softly against the polished floor. Lieutenant Chen, a security officer's voice crackled over her comm. It was firm, professional, tinged with disbelief. Why are the cubs following you through the hall? That's a violation of containment protocol. Mara glanced down at the cubs. One blinked up at her, yawning lazily, while the other tilted its head, as if ready to challenge the very idea of following rules. She smiled, voice calm and almost musical as she replied, "They're not following Lieutenant Scar. They choose." There was a pause. The security officer's tone shifted, a careful mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "Explain, human." Mara laughed softly. "I don't force them. I don't command them. They choose to walk with me because they trust me, because we have a bond that no protocol can dictate. Following is for drones. Choice is for the living." 2 hours earlier, the morning briefing had been routine. Orpheus Alpha was a research and defense station orbiting a neutral colony planet in the Hyades cluster. Mara's role was liaison officer for interspecies integration, a position that required patience, diplomacy, and an uncanny ability to understand creatures most would call unmanageable. The cubs had been lively from the moment she opened their containment pod. One had immediately darted up her sleeve, claws retracted, ears flicking like small flags of intent. The other had leapt onto her shoulder, snuggling against her neck. Mara had laughed as they wriggled with excitement. "Quiet, little ones," she said softly, scratching behind one cub's ears. "Today, we have a long walk through the station. You'll see the halls, meet the cadets, learn their rhythms." The cubs had chirped, a sound somewhere between a cat's purr and a miniature roar, vibrating against her skin. Mara had smiled, feeling the tiny pulse of energy and intelligence beneath her fingers. "Ready?" she asked. The cubs responded with little growls of delight. "Then let's go." As they stepped into the main corridors, the cadets froze mid-stride. Some had never seen predator cubs outside the controlled environment of the arena. A few muttered to one another, and a telepathic student shivered as the cubs' playful curiosity brushed against their mental shields. The cubs didn't rush or sprint. They walked beside Mara in careful steps, pausing now and then to sniff at walls, hover near consoles, or glance up at the human with trusting eyes. Mara walked steadily, a calm presence anchoring the energy of the creatures beside her. Lieutenant Scar caught up to her at the junction near the observation deck. His exoskeletal scales glinted under the overhead lights. His 4 eyes scanned Mara and the cubs with sharp focus. "Human," he said, voice deep and resonant. "Why are these creatures accompanying you?" "Protocol requires that they remain in containment or under direct observation in training areas. Not in general circulation." "They're not accompanying me, Scar," Mara said, crouching slightly to meet the cubs at eye level. "They're choosing. They don't follow. They choose." The cubs chirped softly, tails flicking. One nudged Mara's hand with its head, as if emphasizing the point. Scar's claws clicked against the floor. "Choice is a human interpretation. These are predators. Instinct dictates behavior. Following is the natural result." "Instinct isn't everything," Mara replied gently. "Trust can override instinct. Respect can guide behavior. And, sometimes, a bond can create something extraordinary." The cubs shifted, ears flicking toward her voice. Scar's secondary eyes blinked slowly. He had witnessed Mara's interactions with the cubs before during controlled exercises, but this this was different. Here, in the unstructured corridor, the cubs weren't responding to commands, they were actively making decisions. They recognized leadership, Mara continued, but not because I enforce it, because I earn it. Choice, not obedience. That's what makes them extraordinary, and what makes humans extraordinary too. Scar paused, seemingly weighing the implications. Humans, you always assert that your methods are superior. You always claim adaptability. And yet, you risk protocol and… I don't risk it, Mara said firmly. I understand it. I navigate it. I adapt to it. And these cubs, like humans, aren't meant to be confined to rules alone. They choose to trust, to act, to accompany. That's what makes them alive. The hallway ahead opened into the main atrium, sunlight from the observation windows casting long shadows. The cubs padded forward, sniffing cautiously at the polished floor, exploring their surroundings without hesitation, yet never straying far from Mara's side. Cadets watched silently, mixing with fear. You see, Mara said softly, they're not following because they must. They're choosing because they understand in their own way that I am reliable, that I am consistent, that I care, that trust is more valuable than obedience. A small cadet from a winged species stepped forward, whispering to a friend, It's incredible. They're actually choosing her. The cub's eyes flicked toward the cadets, tails twitching. Mara knelt slightly and smiled. Even with all your fear, they still recognize intent. They see calm where you see chaos. They see certainty where you see hesitation. And they choose to accompany the certainty. Scar's voice, deep and thoughtful, resonated through the hall. You assert that choice can override instinct, that trust can guide behavior, that loyalty is not coerced but granted. Yes, Mara said, standing upright, placing one hand lightly on a cub's back. That's exactly it. Humans aren't bound by instinct alone. We can earn loyalty, inspire trust, and sometimes we're extraordinary because we choose not to dominate, but to guide. The cubs meandered, tails brushing Mara's legs lightly, sniffing at a console. One chirped softly, then returned to her side, nudging her hand with its head. The other rolled onto its back playfully, paws reaching up. Mara laughed, stroking its fur. See? They're playful, curious, loyal, but only because they choose to be. Nothing is forced. Cadets exchanged glances, some scribbling notes into their datapads, others whispering theories. Even Scar seemed momentarily at a loss for words. They're learning from you, Mara said softly, glancing at the cadets. Not just about predator behavior, but about humans. About the value of patience, observation, and empathy. About how adaptability can achieve more than brute force. The cubs bounded ahead, then returned to her side, nudging her hand. Mara smiled. Every step they take beside me is a choice, and every step they take teaches them, and you, what it means to trust. Scar's eyes flickered, processing the implications. Humans, you assert moral concepts onto instinct. You claim leadership through choice, not command. This defies protocol but achieves results. Exactly, Mara said. Results that matter. Not because of fear, not because of rules, but because of trust and choice. That's how humans succeed where others hesitate. By the time the group reached the observation deck, the cubs were settled at Mara's feet, purring softly. Cadets finally began to relax, some kneeling to observe, some scribbling furiously into datapads. Mara knelt, letting the cubs climb onto her lap. They could have stayed in their pods, she said softly. They could have ignored me, but they didn't. They chose this. And that choice is more powerful than any protocol, any training exercise, or any instinctual behavior. Scar's voice came again, calm but resonant. Human, it seems your philosophy is simple. Trust, choice, and empathy can guide behavior better than rules or fear. Yes, Mara said, brushing her fingers through the cub's fur. And humans are extraordinary because we understand this. We earn loyalty. We inspire trust. We create bonds that transcend instinct. And sometimes, We do it while walking through a hallway on a station in the middle of the galaxy. The cubs chirped in agreement. Mara smiled. And that, Lieutenant Scar, is why they don't follow. They choose. The cadets watched in awe, whispers spreading. One muttered, "Humans, they're incredible." Mara laughed softly, standing and letting the cubs tumble to the floor beside her. "We don't always follow rules to the letter," she said. "But we understand what matters and we act accordingly. That's what makes us special. That's what makes us human. And sometimes, that's enough to inspire trust, even in creatures governed by instinct." The cubs padded beside her once more, tails flicking in satisfaction. Mara led them toward the next corridor, her presence calm, confident, and undeniably human. And as they walked, the cadets whispered, the security officer muttered in disbelief, and Scar finally allowed a slow, deliberate nod. Choice, trust, loyalty, humanity. Somewhere in the galaxy the cubs had chosen well, and so had the humans who guided them.